James Richardson was one of the wealthiest software entrepreneurs in the world. He didn't build flashy apps or social platforms people talked about at dinner parties. His work lived quietly in the background of global finance, invisible systems, complex algorithms, digital architecture designed to help the already wealthy protect, hide, and multiply their money. Banks relied on his software. Family offices paid fortunes for access to it. Entire portfolios moved at the click of a button because of tools he created. By his early 40s, James's personal net worth had crossed into the billions. Not paper wealth, not estimates, real money, the kind that keeps growing even while you sleep. He owned properties on 3 continents, a glass and steel apartment overlooking the Pacific, a countryside estate hidden behind gates and trees, and penthouse suites in cities where the lights never seemed to turn off. He flew private, not because he needed to, but because waiting longer made sense to him. Time had become more valuable than money. He slept in hotels where a single night cost more than what many families earned in an entire year. Rooms so quiet they felt detached from the world outside. Beds so soft they erased the memory of fatigue. And for a long time, James believed this was the reward, the proof that he had made it. But wealth had done something else too. It had insulated him from discomfort, from hunger, from uncertainty, from standing in lines, from being told no, from needing anyone. It insulated him from the kind of daily stress that slowly wears people down, and without him noticing, it insulated him from invisibility. James was always seen, always acknowledged, always welcomed. Doors opened before he reached them. Chairs were pulled out. Voices lowered when he entered a room. And slowly, quietly, it insulated him from understanding people. For months, something about this began to trouble him. He noticed how reactions changed depending on what he wore, how his name alone could shift a conversation, how generosity toward him seemed effortless. Whenever he donated money, people praised him. Articles were written. Applause followed. When he appeared at events, security moved aside. When he spoke, rooms fell silent. People nodded before he finished his sentences. And one evening, sitting alone after another polished charity dinner, a thought crept in that he couldn't shake. Were people responding to him? Or to what he represented? To the money, the influence, the safety of being close to power. He wondered what would happen if all of that disappeared. If the watch was gone, the tailored clothes, the name. If he stood somewhere with nothing, no introduction, no status, no protection, would anyone still see him? That question stayed with him. It followed him into meetings, into flights, into quiet hotel rooms at night, until eventually curiosity turned into resolve. So he designed an experiment, not a publicity stunt, not content for social media, not something meant to impress or inspire. There would be no announcements, no speeches, no brand attached, something private, something deliberately uncomfortable, something that risked shattering what he believed about the world and about himself. He would strip away every visible marker of wealth. No watch, no tailored suit, no credit cards, no assistants hovering nearby. He would step into a world he had always looked at from behind glass, a world he had funded but never lived in, and for the first time in his adult life, he would find out what it felt like to be seen as nothing at all. James Richardson was one of the wealthiest software entrepreneurs in the world. He didn't build products people lined up overnight to buy. His work wasn't flashy. It didn't trend. Instead, he built invisible systems, digital frameworks designed to help the already rich protect what they had and quietly turn it into more. His software moved money most people would never touch, numbers so large they stopped feeling real, wealth that grew in the background, unnoticed, unstoppable. By his early 40s, James's personal worth had crossed into the billions. Not theoretical wealth, not stock estimates, real money, the kind that changes how the world treats you. He owned properties on 3 continents, places he visited when he wanted silence, places designed to keep the rest of the world far away. He flew private, not out of luxury anymore, but because waiting felt unnecessary. Because time had become more valuable than money. He slept in hotels where a single night cost more than what many people earned in a year. Rooms so quiet they felt detached from reality. Beds so soft they erased the memory of struggle. For a long time, James believed this was success, the reward for years of sacrifice, the proof that he had won. But wealth had done something else too, something quieter. It had insulated him from discomfort, from hunger, from uncertainty, from standing in line, from being told no, from being ignored, and without him realizing it, it insulated him from invisibility. James was always seen, always acknowledged, always welcomed. When he entered a room, conversations paused. When he spoke, people listened, sometimes before they even understood what he was saying. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, wealth insulated him from understanding people. For months, a feeling followed him. Subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. He began to notice patterns. Whenever he donated money, people praised him. They applauded generosity without asking questions. When he appeared at events, doors opened before he reached them. When he spoke, heads nodded in agreement. But something about it felt hollow, predictable. One night, after another polished charity dinner, James found himself alone with a thought he couldn't silence. Were people responding to him, or to what he represented? The money, the influence, the safety of standing close to power. He wondered what would happen if all of that disappeared. If the watch was gone, the tailored suit, the name. If he stood somewhere with nothing, no status, no protection, no explanation. Would anyone still see him? That question stayed with him. It followed him into meetings, onto flights, into quiet hotel rooms late at night, until curiosity turned into something heavier, a need. So he designed an experiment, not a publicity stunt, not content for social media, not something meant to inspire applause. There would be no cameras in his face, no announcement afterward. Something private, something deliberately uncomfortable. He would remove every visible sign of wealth. No watch, no fine clothes, no assistants nearby. He would step into a world he had always observed from a distance, a world he had funded, but never lived in. And for the first time in his adult life, James Richardson would find out what it felt like to exist without being seen at all. A black vehicle slowed at the edge of one of Manila's most affluent shopping districts. It didn't linger. The door opened, then closed. And just like that, James was alone. Around him, luxury, glass storefronts reflecting the morning sun, security guards standing perfectly still, sidewalks polished until they shone. This was a place designed to impress, designed to exclude. James lowered himself against the wall of a high-end boutique. He chose the spot carefully, visible, but not in the way people wanted to see. He placed a cardboard sign beside him. The letters were uneven. The message was simple. Hungry. Anything helps. No explanation. No story, just need. His cup rested on the ground in front of him. Inside, a few coins, placed there earlier by his assistant. They clinked softly when the cup moved. That sound felt louder than it should have. The experiment had begun. People passed. At first, a few at a time, then in waves. Designer bags swung from manicured hands, logos he recognized instantly. Scents of expensive perfume lingered in the air long after their owners had gone. Shoes that cost more than his clothes clicked sharply against the pavement. Every step precise, purposeful. James lifted his head. For brief moments, eyes met his, then slid away. A woman slowed, then raised her phone, pretending to read a message. A man adjusted his jacket and stepped around him as if avoiding a puddle. A group of teenagers laughed, walking too close, one nearly brushing James's hand. They recoiled instinctively, then walked faster. No insults, no mocking. No one told him to leave, but no one stopped. No one asked his name. No one asked if he was okay. Just absence, a quiet, practiced refusal to see. Minutes passed, then more minutes. The sun climbed higher, pressing down on the street. Heat radiated from the concrete beneath him, seeping through thin fabric into his legs. His skin burned where it touched the ground. Sweat soaked his shirt. His mouth grew dry. He swallowed, but there was no relief. Thirst tightened his throat. Time stretched. What began as observation slowly became endurance. James shifted his weight, then stopped. He didn't want to draw attention. He didn't want to be a problem. The realization hit him suddenly. He wasn't pretending anymore. The discomfort was real. The fatigue was real. The invisibility was real. This wasn't acting. This wasn't an experiment on paper. This was the first time in his life that the world was moving all around him, and he was no longer part of it. A security guard approached. His steps were unhurried, practiced, not angry, not aggressive, just indifferent. He didn't raise his voice, didn't insult James. He simply pointed down the street. "You can't stay here." That was all. No explanation, no argument, just a boundary. James nodded and began to stand. Slowly. His legs protested immediately. Muscles stiff from hours on concrete seized as he straightened up. A sharp cramp shot through his calf. His feet throbbed inside thin sandals. For a moment he lost his balance. No one noticed. He gathered his sign and cup and moved on. Not chased, not threatened, dismissed. He walked until he found another place to sit. This time, near a cafe. Every time the door opened, a wave of cold air spilled onto the sidewalk. James positioned himself carefully, just close enough to feel it brush his skin, just close enough to remember what comfort felt like. Inside, people sat in soft chairs. They sipped iced drinks beaded with condensation, typed on glowing laptops, laughed at things James couldn't hear. The contrast was painful. James lowered his gaze. Then a young woman stepped out of the cafe. She slowed. She looked at him. Not a glance. A look. For a brief second, her eyes met his and didn't move away. Something crossed her face. Concern. Maybe. Uncertainty. A flicker of humanity. James felt it. He felt seen. Then her partner spoke from behind her. She turned her head, nodded, and kept walking. The moment passed. James stared at the ground, and something clicked in his mind. Ignoring someone wasn't passive. It wasn't accidental. It took effort. It took a decision. And the people here were very good at making it. Time dragged on. The sun shifted. The street never slowed. After hours in the wealthiest district of the city, James looked into his cup. The same few coins sat at the bottom, untouched, unchanged, as if time itself had decided he did not exist. James walked until his feet burned. Every step sent a dull ache up his legs. The thin soles of his sandals offered no protection. He moved away from glass towers, away from polished sidewalks that reflected faces too busy to notice him. The city changed gradually. Luxury storefronts faded into small shops. Steel and glass gave way to concrete and color. He reached a crowded neighborhood where life didn't hide indoors. It spilled into the streets. Vendors shouted prices over one another. Metal carts rattled as they rolled past. Children ran between adults, laughing, weaving through traffic without fear. Jeepneys honked constantly, never fully stopping. Motorcycles squeezed through impossible gaps. There was no space here to avoid people. Bodies brushed past one another. Eye contact was unavoidable. James lowered himself near a vegetable cart, his movements slow, careful. The vendor barely glanced at him. No security guard approached. No one told him to move. Within minutes, an elderly woman pushing a small cart stopped in front of him. Her hands were worn. Skin thickened by decades of work. Her dress was faded, washed thin by time. She looked at James. Not past him, not through him, at him. She reached into her pocket and unfolded a small bill, creased from being counted too many times. She placed it gently into his cup. Then she asked if he'd eaten. Her voice was soft, uncertain, but kind. James shook his head. She touched his shoulder, a brief, reassuring gesture, and continued on her way, pushing her cart back into the crowd. James stared at the bill resting in his cup. To him it meant nothing. To her it meant something. It meant part of her day, part of her effort, part of her security. His chest tightened. Then it happened again. A street food vendor noticed him. Without stopping, without making a show of it, the vendor placed a small bag of snacks beside James. Still warm, still fresh. No explanation. The vendor walked away immediately, already calling out prices to the next customer. James sat frozen. Then a construction worker passed by. Dust clung to his clothes. His face was streaked with sweat and grime. He slowed, then surprised James by sitting down beside him. The man opened his lunch, rice and meat wrapped in thin paper. He looked at James, tore the food in half, and handed one portion over. No words, no questions. They ate together, side by side, in silence. The sounds of the street filled the space between them. Horns, footsteps, voices. The worker finished, wiped his hands on his pants, stood, and nodded once. Then he went back to work. James watched him disappear into the crowd. Something had shifted. Here, people didn't look away. They couldn't afford to. Here, suffering wasn't abstract. It lived next door. It shared the street. It wore familiar faces. James realized this place didn't offer comfort, but it offered recognition. And with it, a quiet, dangerous kind of generosity. The kind that didn't come from abundance, but from memory. And James was about to learn just how far that generosity could go. And that was when James realized something unsettling. The kindness he was seeing wasn't finished. It was only beginning to ask for more. The kindness escalated. A driver stopped traffic to hand him a few coins. Passengers nodded, in approval. A mother gave him a piece of fruit, apologizing she couldn't offer more. Each person had little, yet each gave. By late afternoon, James's cup held less than $3, but it felt heavier than anything he'd ever owned. Then a teenage girl approached. She wore a simple school uniform. She held a plastic bag. Inside was rice and chicken, still warm. She offered it to him. James shook his head. She insisted. She placed it beside him and hurried away to her waiting mother. James watched them walk off together, and something inside him broke. James cried, not because he was hungry, but because a child had given him her meal. People with nothing had treated him like someone who mattered. People with everything had not. The experiment was over. He called for pickup. But the lesson stayed. Days later, James returned. Clean, well-dressed, unmistakable. He sought out those who had helped him. The elderly vendor, the worker, the driver, the girl and her family. He didn't give charity. He gave recognition, education funds, housing support, stable jobs. Lives changed. Not because he was rich, but because they were kind. That night, James reviewed the footage. 2 worlds, one ignored suffering, one shared pain, and he finally understood. Generosity isn't about abundance, it's about memory. Those who remember hunger never ignore it. Those who remember invisibility never walk past it. True wealth isn't what you have, it's what you give, when giving costs you something.